All right, guys, so today we're going to start with the next chapter in Outcome 1, Unit 4, which is Chapter 9. And this chapter is basically an introduction into sleep, talking about the two types of sleep, talking about the different stages, talking about why we sleep, what's the purpose of sleep, as well as talking about how our sleep patterns and our sleep duration changes according to what age we are, or as we get older, how our sleep patterns change. Okay, so that's basically an overall scope of what this chapter is going to cover. So the first spread is 9A. 9A is looking at sleep rhythms. Okay, so in this chapter, this is more of an introduction into what sleep is, and we're going to look at the different stages of sleep. This is probably the most heavy spread in terms of content. The rest of the two spreads that we cover are pretty light in terms of the content. So the first thing we want to do, if the name of the chapter is Importance of Sleep, we need to be able to define what sleep is. Okay, so you need to be able to understand what are the key features of sleep that make sleep an altered state of consciousness, because we know sleep is an altered state. Okay, it's one of the altered states we learned about in chapter 8. Now, there are some characteristics of sleep that we can talk about. Number one, sleep is reversible. So sleep is reversible because you go into sleep and you get back up. You go into sleep, you get back up. It can be undone. It can be reversed. Okay. You can go from an altered state of consciousness from sleep back into a normal waking consciousness where you are again awake and alert. It's naturally occurring as we learned about in chapter 8. A naturally occurring altered state is one that happens by itself. I don't have to do something in order to fall asleep. Okay. Now we know that there are some people who might have to take sleeping pills and stuff like that. Again, that shows you that they're not experiencing normal sleep, or they don't have normal sleep patterns. Okay. Their sleep patterns have been disturbed by a specific sleep disorder like insomnia or, other sleep difficulties, which we'll learn about a little bit more in chapter 10. But for most of us who have healthy sleep patterns, sleep is a naturally occurring ASC, or altered state of consciousness. It involves suspending our consciousness, which we know when we're asleep, we're not awake, we're not alert, we're not aware of our environment around us. Another characteristic of sleep is that we become disengaged from perceptual experience. So remember, when we talk about perceptual experiences or perception, we're talking about the senses, so what we can see. When we're asleep, our eyes are closed, so we can't really see things that are happening around us. When we're asleep, our senses become a little bit more dulled, okay? They don't become as strong as they are in normal waking state when we're alert. So if someone's talking about something and we're asleep, we might not be able to hear them. We might not hear someone slamming the door or someone breaking into our house if we're in a deep stage of sleep there, okay? We might not be able to feel things. So for example, if your mom comes into your room to check on you after waking up in the middle of the night and you're in a deep stage of sleep and she just kind of brushes your hair with her hand or something, you won't be able to feel that because your ability to feel touch or texture or pressure is actually dulled as well, or is actually decreased when you're asleep. All because we become disengaged or disconnected from those perceptual experiences. And the last characteristic of sleep that we have to understand is that because we are so disengaged from those perceptual experiences, we also become unresponsive to the environment until we are awake. Okay, so if someone's making noise outside, but you're in a deep sleep, you're not going to be disturbed by that, okay, unless it's loud enough to actually wake you up, or unless you're in a very early stage of sleep where you're not yet really deep into your sleep episode. Okay, so that's basically the different characteristics. Now you need to understand what each of these characteristics are, because they form basically the understanding of why sleep is an altered state of consciousness. Okay, so that's the first slide there, and that's our definition of sleep. The next thing that we have to understand is sleep is a biological rhythm. Okay, biological rhythm means that it causes physiological changes in terms of your bodily functions, in terms of your bodily activity. And those changes, just like a rhythm is something that you kind of hear and it's a continuous thing, biological rhythms or sleep-wake cycles change and they repeat themselves over time. Okay, so you going to sleep, you waking up, you going to sleep again the next night, that's what we call as the sleep-wake cycle. And that's a biological rhythm because that process or that kind of routine and the biological things that happen in your body when you wake up or when you go to sleep repeat themselves over time, literally until the day you die. Okay, so the sleep-wake cycle for that reason is a type of biological rhythm. Okay, and it's underlined by a lot of biological changes in the body. Okay, for example, when we sleep in the early stages of sleep, our body kind of calms itself down, our body temperature drops. Okay, our heart rate kind of decreases a little bit. So we're really getting into that state of relaxing and going to sleep. So that's basically what we're talking about when we're talking about biological rhythm. Now, how does light affect our biological rhythm? Okay, a lot of people today have issues with sleep because of exposure to light. And you might have heard about something called blue light. Okay, blue light and any specific light in general is not too good for you after a specific time of day. The reason for this is that when you're exposed to too much light, when after it's dark outside or something, or you're sitting in front of a laptop or a TV screen that's really brightly lit, even after it's dark outside, your brain gets confused. Okay, and the reason for this is that your brain basically is affected by the release of light. So that basically affects your biological rhythm there of your sleep-wake cycle. The other reason that we have to look at is that when you see light when you wake up first thing in the morning, that actually causes the release of melatonin. Okay, melatonin is our sleep hormone, and that sleep hormone is suppressed or inhibited or stopped, and that allows us to feel awake and feel alert. Okay, so that's basically what we're talking about when we're talking about our sleep-wake cycle there. When we're talking about, how light is going to affect your sleep-wake cycle, and we'll learn a little bit more about this when we talk about chapter 10. Okay, in chapter 10 we look at things like sleep disturbances, and we look at things like insomnia and what causes or what contributes to insomnia and sleep disturbances. So when we're looking at, for example, when we wake up first thing in the morning, when we're seeing the light outside, that actually activates your brain to actually stop releasing melatonin. And the minute that melatonin stops getting released, you actually stop feeling sleepy, or you start to feel awake, and you tell yourself, oh my God, like I can't go back to sleep anymore. Okay, because melatonin is our sleep hormone. Okay, that's the hormone that's associated with us feeling sleepy. When it gets released in the evening time, we fall asleep. That's why generally as it gets darker, we tend to feel sleepier. Okay, in the morning time, this is why some people cannot have a nap in the morning time, no matter how hard they try, because that melatonin stops getting released. Okay, so again, the light outside does affect our sleep-wake cycles. Okay, people living in countries where like Norway, for example, where the sun goes down at like 4 o'clock or something, or 3 o'clock, and they barely see any sunlight, actually have an increased prevalence of sleep disorders for this reason, because the amount of natural light that they see compared to the darkness that they see is imbalanced. There's no balance there. Okay, so that's basically talking about sleep as a biological rhythm. So we've got two types of biological rhythms. You've got your circadian rhythms and you've got your ultradian rhythms. The circadian rhythms are basically happen every 24 hours, whereas your ultradian rhythms happen many times. Okay, so ultradian rhythms happen many times in a 24-hour period, whereas your circadian rhythms generally happen like once every 24 hours. Okay, these are the two main types of biological rhythms that we look at. So when we're looking at biological rhythms, and the first one is circadian rhythm. Circadian rhythm refers to changes in bodily activity or function that occur once every 24 hours. So you need to underline that in your notes, okay? Once every 24 hours. They last about 24 hours, and for that reason, they can only happen once in a 24-hour period. Okay, so this is basically, you can see in this image here, this boy falling asleep at 11 p.m. Oh, that's too late for a little boy to fall asleep. Let's say 8 p.m. Okay, so the boy falls asleep at 8 p.m., wakes up the next morning at 7 a.m. And then the same day when he goes back to sleep that evening, it's 8 p.m. again. So basically what we're seeing here, guys, is the time it takes for him to fall asleep the previous night compared to the time it takes for them to fall asleep the next night is a 24-hour period. And that is the circadian cycle in this example. That is the sleep-wake cycle. Okay, so that's basically looking at the the sleep-wake cycle as a circadian rhythm. Okay. Okay, so that's what we're looking at when we look at sleep as a circadian rhythm. Okay, so basically looking at the fact that it lasts 24 hours. We're not talking about the time between the person falling asleep and waking up. That's called your general one night sleep or sleep episode. We're talking about the time it takes for the person to fall asleep the previous night to the time that they get into bed the next night. That is the whole sleep-wake cycle. Okay. Now, the sleep-wake cycle is influenced by the amount of light you're exposed to. So you need to be able to, see proper daylight and when you wake up first thing in the morning, and you need to be able to have a nice dark environment to sleep in once you go to sleep. Okay, so that's basically talking about the effect of light and how it affects your sleep-wake cycle. We're going to learn more about this effect of light on the sleep-wake cycle when we do chapter 10, because it's actually one of the therapies that we use for people that have sleep issues or who have sleep disorders there. Okay, so that's basically the circadian rhythm. The next one is the ultradian rhythm. Now, ultradian rhythms are basically the opposite of a circadian rhythm. They occur more than once in a 24-hour period. Okay, so they occur within a cycle that occurs less than 24 hours, and they basically usually involve changes in your physiological functioning or activity there. So usually activities or functions that operate on an ultradian biological rhythm are kind of functions that you would do many times a day. For example, we eat something when we wake up in the morning, but then we feel hungry again. We finish eating that, we might feel hungry in the middle of the day again. So hunger is an ultradian rhythm, or operates on an ultradian rhythm, because it happens more than once in a 24-hour period. Okay, the same thing, going to the toilet, okay, or urination. This is also a physiological activity or function that actually operates on an ultradian rhythm, because we go to the toilet more than once in a 24-hour period. Okay, and it's not like we can hold in going to the toilet for like 24 hours. It's not possible. It's not good for the body. So for that reason, urination is also operating on an ultradian rhythm. When we link it to sleep rather than physiological functioning only, when we link it to sleep, having one night of sleep is also an example of an ultradian rhythm. Now you have to be careful here, okay? Not the sleep-wake cycle. Okay, the sleep-wake cycle is a circadian rhythm. Okay, but the actual sleep duration or a sleep episode, like a typical night of sleep that most of us have, will be an ultradian rhythm, for the simple fact that no one sleeps typically for 24 hours. Okay, most of us will sleep for maybe 6, 7, 8, 9, maybe 10 hours if we're lucky. Okay, some of you might even sleep for 4 or 5 hours, which isn't really good, but it happens. So that is basically what sleep is as an ultradian rhythm. Okay, it's basically the typical sleep duration being less than 24 hours. Okay, so that's basically what the ultradian rhythm is. So guys, when you're comparing sleep duration, we are looking at the fact, when we're comparing the biological rhythms, we're looking at the fact that, the ultradian rhythm happens on a cycle that occurs less than 24 hours. So it happens many times, and the circadian rhythm happens only once every 24 hours. Okay, that's the basic idea there. Okay, so if we move on to the next slide. So now we're looking at the two types of sleep. Okay, so we've got NREM sleep and we've got REM sleep. NREM sleep is basically the first type of sleep we go into when our head hits the pillow. So basically that's what we're talking about when we're talking about our NREM sleep. Okay, NREM sleep is composed of 4 stages, which we will look at, and it's also composed of REM sleep, which we'll also have a look at. Okay, so that's the basic idea there. So REM sleep is a separate type of sleep, and we're also going to look at that separately. Okay, so these are 2 different types of sleep. Now a complete single sleep cycle. I don't know why my Zoom is playing up. Just give me 1 second. Okay, weird. Okay, a single sleep cycle. So the time it takes you to go through 1, 2, 3, 4 stages of NREM, so 1 to 4, along with the 1 cycle of REM, is 90 minutes. Okay, and most of us will go through this cycle 5 to 6 times each night. So if you do the math, 90 times 5 or 90 times 6 is about 540 minutes at max. And if you divide that by 60, you get about 9 hours there. Okay, and most of us generally sleep for about that time period. So a single sleep cycle goes for 90 minutes, which is about 1.5 hours, and most of us will go through that single sleep cycle 5 to 6 times. Okay, that's the basic idea. Okay, so that's NREM and REM sleep there. Just an introduction into what they are. Okay, the sleep hypnogram. So a hypnogram is something that you can be assessed on in the exam. It's not that difficult, but it looks more complicated than it is. On the x-axis, before I talk about the graph itself, what is a hypnogram? A hypnogram is basically like if I'm analyzing someone in a lab that's sleeping, I can basically make a judgment of their sleep or analyze their sleep patterns by turning their sleep data into a hypnogram. And the hypnogram, basically what it shows us is the sleep duration, which is the number of hours that person sleeps on the x-axis. And on the y-axis, you have the actual stages of sleep that person is going through. Okay, so you can see that this is the sleep duration. One sleep cycle is about 1.5 hours or 90 minutes. So one sleep cycle would end around here, around this point, okay, or in the graphics around here. Okay, more or less the same. So this is where sleep cycle 1 ends and then the next one begins. And they've put these like dashed or dotted lines there to show you when each sleep cycle starts before the next one begins. Okay, so you can see here, literally the lines just show you the time, like the fact that the person has reached NREM stage 1, now they're going into stage 2, now they're going into stage 3, now they're going into stage 4, okay? Obviously, you just match the line with the stage that it corresponds to. Another thing that you need to mention is, or you need to look out for when you analyze these graphs, is how long the line is. You can see in stage 1 here, the horizontal line comes down to NREM stage 4, and it's really long. It goes for like quite a bit of time there before it then jumps back up to NREM stage 3, okay? Because it goes all the way down and then it goes backwards, so it backtracks 4, 3, 2, 1, like that, okay? So basically, you can see that that's long. That means that this person has spent a long time in NREM stage 4, okay? And NREM stage 4 is actually the deepest stage of sleep, which we'll learn about in a second, okay? So the basic rules, guys, is if the line is shorter, it means that that person has spent a very short period of time in that specific stage. Okay, and you can match the line to the stage that it corresponds to. Okay, REM sleep is indicated by the pink shaded portions here. As you can see, it's also in pink font. Okay, so you can see that the general pattern we see that is as the night goes on and as the person is sleeping further and going into deeper sleep, the periods of REM sleep get longer. They start off as small and you can see that they extend and they become longer. Okay, they start off as a square and then they become longer, so much so that this portion of shaded space becomes a rectangle. Okay, so that's important for us to remember. This person only had 5 sleep cycles before they woke up. So, you know, that shows you again that they've slept for that many hours. This is mostly assessed in multiple choice questions. So they might give you a hypnogram. They might not tell you that it relates to an adult. They might say, okay, this is the hypnogram of a sleeper. Which of the following age groups or stages of the lifespan would this sleep cycle correspond to? Now, this is more connected to spread 7C, which we haven't covered yet, but we usually cover this topic with reference to spread 7C. So you'll make the connections when we get there. Okay, that's a hypnogram. You need to be able to know how to read it. You need to be able to understand what it's trying to tell you. Okay, so moving on to the 5 stages of sleep. We say there are 5 stages because we've got NREM's 4 stages, which are 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we've got the REM stage. Okay, that's the basic idea there. So NREM stages 1 to 4 are basically looking at, the first 2 are the light stages of sleep and the last 2 are kind of like the deeper stages of sleep. So that's the basic idea there. And then REM sleep is, although REM sleep comes after stage 4, it's not actually a deep stage of sleep, as we'll learn, okay? So those are the stages of sleep. One thing I want to mention as well, I know a lot of you go online to get information for your notes or to get images or diagrams. A lot of online diagrams don't actually acknowledge stage 4. They just say the 3 stages of NREM. But according to our study design and the VICA key knowledge dot points, and according to most sleep researchers, we do acknowledge stage 3 and stage 4 as 2 separate stages. Okay, a lot of stuff online will tell you, oh, stage 4 is just a part of stage 3. It's not a separate stage, but we acknowledge that it is a separate stage. Okay, so just letting you guys know that in advance. Okay, so moving on, we're going to look at what NREM sleep is. So NREM sleep is basically the type of sleep that we spend most of our total sleep time in. Okay, we spend about approximately 80% of our total sleep time in NREM sleep. So that's important for us to remember. NREM sleep has 4 stages ranging from light sleep to deep sleep. So stages 1 and 2 are the light stages of sleep in NREM. So that's 1 and 2. And deep sleep is stages 3 and 4. Okay, and each of these stages have different characteristics or key features, which I've summarized in a table on the next slide, which we'll look at. In general, non-rapid eye movement sleep or NREM sleep is to do with physical restoration of the body. People who are more physically active, who go to the gym a lot, who are marathon runners, for example, will generally spend more time in NREM sleep. And we'll learn more about this when we cover the restoration theory of sleep in spread 9B or the next spread. Okay, as we saw in the hypnogram before, as the night goes on, our overall time spent in NREM sleep decreases, and the opposite is also true. The time we spend in REM sleep, which were the pink color blocks that were shaded in the previous slide, actually increases. Okay, so NREM sleep decreases as the night goes on, REM sleep increases as the night goes on. Okay, and we'll learn more about these characteristics in the next slide. So we'll just go to the table on the next slide. And this table, I know you're all going to have a heart attack looking at this now, but this table basically summarizes about 6 slides worth of content in one table. So it's making it a lot easier for you guys, because I remember with last year's group, we didn't have this table, and I keep remembering that thought that I had in my head that if we had a table that just summarized everything, it would be much easier rather than students having to go back and forth. Okay, so this table is specifically summarizing 5 or 6 slides. That's why it looks like a lot of information. Okay, so keep that in mind before you complain. So that's the 4 stages of NREM sleep. Okay, so that's basically looking at what the stages are. And then we're looking at the description of each stage. So basically a small definition, we're looking at the brainwave patterns or what activity we would see on an EEG machine. So what type of wave we would see. We're looking at muscle movement, which we would judge by an EMG. And these are all devices we learned about in spread 8B, I believe, no, 8C from last class. EOG is basically looking at the eye activity, okay? So again, something we learned about last class. Special features and characteristics. This column basically looks at what's something exclusive to that specific stage that is special to that stage or is specific or unique to that stage. Something that really stands out as something you should know about that stage, okay? So this is a really important column. And is it easy to wake someone up if they are sleeping and they're in this stage of sleep? So yes, no, yes, no. Okay, so we'll quickly run through it. When we're looking at stage 1 is a transition stage. This is the stage where you feel a bit drowsy, but you're not completely like tired. You're not completely like asleep yet, but you feel drowsy. This is the point at which your body tells you, okay, I think it's time to go to bed. And you kind of hit the bed. You're still awake, but you're not like completely asleep yet, okay? This transition stage involves very light sleep. So very light sleep means that anyone can wake you up. That's why it's very easy to wake someone up in this stage, okay? The brainwave patterns that you see on an EEG, if I'm to hook someone up to an EEG at this stage and put the electrodes on their head, I would be able to see that they have alpha waves, but those alpha waves slowly start to disappear and are replaced by theta waves, particularly as the person moves out of stage 1 and into stage 2, we're going to see more theta waves, okay? But in the initial stages of stage 1 NREM, we're seeing a lot of alpha. This is when the person has first hit the person has first kind of hit the bed and their head has hit the pillow. We're seeing a lot of alpha there, okay? Alpha waves are released just from general drowsiness, okay? Now, in stage 1, we see high muscle movement. Obviously, if you've hit the bed, you're still tossing and turning. Okay, sometimes we have this funny thing that we experience called a hypnic jerk. A hypnic jerk is basically like your legs do this weird thing where they kind of spasm. You can't control that. It just happens. It's a weird experience, okay? So that can occur in stage 1 as well, just as your body kind of adjusts itself from being awake to being asleep. Low activity on the EEG. So again, non-rapid eye movement means that every stage of NREM will obviously have not much eye movement. So everything is low, very low or little to no activity. Okay, so you don't have any high eye movement here. High eye movement is only seen in REM sleep, which stands for rapid eye movement. So just remember that. Okay, so that's low activity. The special feature of this stage is the hypnagogic state. This is the state that we experience when we're going from being awake to being asleep. Some people experience seeing like weird colors or different things in their vision. Some people experience, and this is more common, involuntary or automatic muscle spasms. And we call those muscle spasms hypnic jerks. Okay. Hypnic jerks means they just happen automatically. Okay. Stage two is when true sleep is said to begin. Okay. Someone could be faking sleep and we can confirm if they're faking their sleep in a sleep lab. But the minute that a person goes into stage two, we can confirm using all these different measurements and equipment that this person is now truly asleep. They're not faking it, they're actually asleep. So this is why we say stage two is where true sleep begins, okay? It's still pretty light. So for that reason, yes, it's still quite easy to wake someone up. So if you're in stage 2 NREM sleep and you've actually like fallen asleep, true sleep has begun, if someone slams the door outside, you would be able to wake up from that, okay? So that is basically why it's easy to wake someone up in stage 2. In stage 2, we continue to see those theta waves that had started from stage 1. They continue to be released and produced in stage 2 as well. We see moderate activity, so not as high as stage 1, because you're actually kind of truly asleep now, but your muscles are still moving. You might be tossing and turning in bed, not to the extent that it wakes you up completely, but you're still kind of tossing and turning kind of unconsciously there. There's low activity on the EOG again, non-rapid eye movement, not much activity. Special features of stage 2 are these specific brainwave characteristics called sleep spindles. So if you hook someone up to an EEG when they're in stage 2 NREM sleep, you'll see these very high frequency bursts of brainwaves that look something like this, okay? And then suddenly they'll be increasing in frequency like that. That portion there, that is high frequency and very bunched up together, is called a sleep spindle. And this is kind of what it might look like on an EEG, okay? A very fast or high frequency burst of brainwaves that then goes back into a kind of less frequency or less fast or less bunched up appearance, okay? K complexes are sudden high amplitude brainwave in response to external stimuli. So like that example I gave you guys before, if I'm sleeping and someone slams the door outside my room, that's a really external stimuli that suddenly occurs, okay? And it's a high noise kind of stimuli there. So that what that might lead to, can't even talk. Okay, hold on. What that might lead to is a K complex. And a K complex looks something like this. Your brainwaves are kind of constant, going good, not that tall yet, because again, we don't really see high amplitude in this stage yet. Suddenly the slam door happens, whoop. That is a K complex. Okay, it's a sudden high amplitude brainwave in response to external stimuli, like someone slamming the door. So at this point of that person's sleep, a sleep researcher can look at this and be like, oh, play back the tape. I think someone must have slammed a door. I think someone must have dropped a glass on the floor or something, because the person's brainwave pattern showed a sudden jump in amplitude. And that's not normal for this stage. Sorry, that's not normal for NREM sleep to have a brainwave that high, but it's normal for stage 2. And it's a brainwave pattern called a K complex. Okay, so that's what it is. The next stage is stage 3. Stage 3 starts our deep sleep. So stages 3 and 4 are what we call deep sleep. Whenever I refer to deep sleep in this chapter or the next chapter, I'm referring to stages 3 and 4 NREM. Okay. Similarly, stages 1 and 2 could be considered the light sleep. Okay. So whenever I refer to light sleep or say the word light sleep, I'm referring to stages 1 and 2 NREM. So when we're looking at this, guys, stage 3 is not the deepest stage of sleep, but it's moderately deep. Okay, it's still quite deep by itself, but it's not the deepest stage that you can have. That's stage 4. So in stage 3 NREM, we see theta waves continue to dominate. But what we also see is that delta waves, so DE for delta, DE for deep sleep, delta waves actually start to be produced, particularly as the person moves out of stage 3 and slowly approaches stage 4. Those delta waves start to increase more in number. Okay, again, moderate activity on an EMG, so you're still not completely you're not like completely frozen in terms of your muscle movement, but people can still toss and turn in bed during this stage. Okay, there's very low activity on an EOG, so eye movements reduce. Again, it's called non-rapid eye movement, so there will be low activity. Sleep inertia is a specific feature of this stage. Okay, if you've ever gone home after school one day and you've had a nap and your mum's like forced you to wake up, she's like, napping in the afternoon is not good for you, blah blah blah, or you know, this is a bad habit, get out of it, or why aren't you studying, or something like that, and you wake up and you're forced to wake up during stage 3 NREM when you were in that stage, When you wake up, you're going to feel blah. I literally wrote the word blah there because that is the feeling that you have, that, oh my God, yuck, like I feel so disgusting. What day is it? Where am I? Like you feel very disoriented, like someone's just kind of abruptly shaken you out of your sleep that you were having. That is called sleep inertia. Okay. Sleep inertia happens in both stages 3 and 4, but we say that it's specific to stage 3 because it starts in stage 3. Okay. That's why we put it as a special feature of this stage. And because stage 3 is the start of deep sleep, it's difficult to wake someone up in this stage. It's not easy. But if you do wake someone up, like the mum coming into the daughter's room or the son's room and saying, wake up, wake up. If you do force someone to wake up, they will experience sleep inertia. Okay. And the last stage, which is stage 4 NREM, is our deepest stage of sleep. That is the deepest stage. Okay. The deepest stage of sleep you'll experience is stage 4 NREM. This is the kind of sleep that if we experience it in a proper amount, we wake up feeling very refreshed and we wake up feeling like we had a deep sleep there, okay, that we didn't just go to sleep and the next minute just wake up. Delta waves are most prominent in this stage. There's no other waves that occur in stage 4. Remember, DE for deepest stage of sleep for stage 4, DE for delta. Okay, moderate activity again on EMG. There's never a point in any of the stages of NREM sleep where you're completely frozen. You're still always moving around. Okay, you're still moving in your sleep. You're still kind of flailing your arm out and hitting the person. Actually, get my book. Okay, you're actually hitting the person next to you. Okay, that is obviously why we have moderate activity in EMG. Okay. This is going to be very much in contrast to REM sleep, where a person is as dead as a log and they're not moving at all. They look frozen. Okay. That's why we've got high muscle movement in all of the stages of NREM, and we've got low muscle movement, low eye movement in all of the stages of NREM. Okay. Because the opposite is true for REM sleep, which we're going to look at in the next slide. Okay, little to no activity on EOG. We know that sleep inertia also occurs in stage 4. Okay, but something more important to stage 4 is that many of our sleep phenomena or sleep behaviors occur in stage 4. Things like nightmares happen in stage 4, sleep talking, sleep walking. A lot of children wet the bed when they're asleep. Okay, bedwetting is also something we only see in stage 4. Okay, so these are stage 4 sleep phenomena or abnormalities in a sleep pattern that we see that only occur when we are in the deepest stage of sleep. Okay, so if someone's talking in their sleep, you can be like, yep, that person is in stage 4 NREM. Okay, now just one thing to note before we move on to the next slide. Nightmares occur in stage 4 NREM, but dreams do not. Okay, dreams only occur in REM sleep. So be careful here. A lot of the time in everyday life, we use these words interchangeably. We say, oh, I had a nightmare, I had a bad dream. They're not the same thing in this chapter for definition purposes. Dreams occur in REM sleep. Dreams never occur in NREM, okay? NREM, only nightmares occur. You can remember N for NREM, N for nightmares, okay? If that helps you remember it better. And obviously, because this is the deepest stage of sleep, similar to stage 3, it's very difficult to wake someone up. But if you do manage to do it, then they will feel sleep inertia. Okay, so that was literally all 4 stages summarized. In terms of the content you need to know, if you have a basic idea of what's on this table and what's on this slide, you don't need to know even a single bit more than this. Okay, so just learn everything that's on this slide. Don't just learn it like memorize it blindly, but compare. Think of yourself going through each stage of sleep and the changes that might be occurring to you. Okay, so don't just look at them individually, look at them in terms of comparing and contrasting one stage with the next stage. Okay, so that is basically our NREM table there for the 4 stages of NREM. Then we've got REM. REM doesn't have different stages like NREM sleep does. Okay, so REM is just one type of sleep. It doesn't have sub-stages, or it's not divided into different stages. REM sleep is called rapid eye movement sleep. The reason it's called rapid eye movement sleep is because your eyes are moving rapidly when you're in this type of sleep. So if you've ever had the opportunity, which you wouldn't, that's weird, but if you ever had the opportunity to, watch someone sleep and see that they're in REM sleep, and this is what sleep researchers do, you'd be able to see that their eyes actually move underneath their eyelids back and forth and up and down while they're sleeping. It's usually side to side, but it can go up and down as well. Okay, that is what we call as rapid eye movement, and that's something we do not see in NREM sleep. Okay, we don't see that eye movement or eyeballs moving underneath the eyelids in NREM sleep. We only see that in REM sleep. So this GIF kind of shows you, if I just press the slide. Yeah, in this GIF, you can see very kind of faintly the guy's eyes moving kind of side to side underneath his eyelids. That's kind of like resembling what rapid eye movement looks like when you're in rapid eye movement sleep, or REM sleep, okay? Now, NREM sleep accounted for about 80% of our total sleep time. So REM sleep accounts for about 20 to 25%. Again, some people don't spend a full 80%. Some people might spend 75% of their sleep in NREM. Some adults, I mean. So again, there's a little range number there. Okay. Contrary to popular thought, a lot of people think that REM sleep is actually the deepest stage of sleep because it's the stage of sleep that comes after NREM, stage 4. That's not correct. It's not the deepest stage. Okay. Remember that. A lot of students make this mistake thinking that REM sleep is the deepest stage. It is not. REM sleep is actually lighter than stages 3 and 4 NREM. Okay. In fact, it's probably in between 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 in terms of how deep it is. Okay. It's pretty easy to wake someone up in REM sleep. In fact, just before you wake up every morning, that 1 hour or that few minutes, like half an hour, 40 minutes that you have just before you wake up is in REM sleep. Okay. That's why a lot of us have dreams just before we wake up. And that's because dreams happen in REM sleep, particularly vivid dreams, like those dreams where you wake up and you actually feel like it was real life. Okay. One dream I always have, a vivid dream, is I dream that I've already woken up and I've put my alarm on snooze, but then I've not actually woken up in real life. And so I'm just like continuing to sleep thinking that the alarm will ring and I'm like, oh my God, I'm late. So I actually feel like it was so real because that is a vivid dream. Okay, a vivid dream is dreams that feel so real and which you can remember clearly. So the person who you see, the first person you see after you wake up, you're like, oh my God, I had this dream. And you can explain it in such intricate detail because it happened in REM sleep. Okay, nightmares are a little bit different. Nightmares you don't recall as well because they happen in NREM stage 4. And you might remember that you were scared, but you might not be able to tell it like a story to those people around you. If you are able to tell it like a story, it was probably not a nightmare, whereas probably a dream, which happened in REM sleep rather than NREM stage 4. So just know the difference between a nightmare and a vivid dream, okay? Vivid dreams happen in REM sleep, and because they happen in REM sleep, R for REM, R for the fact that you can recall them properly, okay? Dreams, sorry, where is it? Nightmares happen in NREM sleep. So N for nightmares, N for NREM stage 4, N for no recall, N for no recall. Okay, so you don't have a really good recall of those nightmares that you might have had. Okay, REM sleep is also called paradoxical sleep because it kind of operates like a paradox. Okay, what this means is a paradox is basically like a contradictory concept. Okay, so in other words, if you're ever watching someone sleep and they're in REM sleep, on the outside, they look almost paralyzed. They have no muscle movement, no muscle tone. Okay, they've lost that muscle tone. They look almost paralyzed. They're like as dead as a log, just asleep. They're not moving. They just look almost like frozen. Okay, that's because in REM sleep, you actually lose muscle tone. And there's a special term we use for this called muscle atonia. Okay, if you come across this is in your book or in any resources, just know that the word muscle atonia means a loss of muscle tone. And this is a key feature, again, of our REM sleep. Now, even though the person looks dead on the outside, has low muscle activity, has lost muscle tone and looks frozen, on the inside, there's actually extremely high activity, okay? And we can see that because if I was to hook someone up to an EEG, which is apparently all I seem to be doing today, taking that person from their REM sleep, hooking them up to an EEG and analyzing the brainwave patterns, I'm going to see beta brainwaves. Now, if you remember from our previous class, beta brainwaves are related to things that we do when we're busy, when we're awake, when we're alert, okay? So a person in REM sleep actually shows brainwave patterns that are very similar to beta brainwaves, okay? Which are usually associated with being awake and being alert. As we're going to learn about in the next spread, this is probably the reason why REM sleep is one of the most important types of sleep for memory consolidation, for problem solving and for mental restoration, like replacing your brain cells and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so we're going to learn about this concept a little bit more in the next spread. So that's the basic idea, guys. Also on this brain scan, you can see that with the high activity there, it's in red. So you can see in REM sleep, there's a lot more red shaded regions compared to non-REM, showing higher brain activity in REM sleep compared to NREM sleep. Okay, so these are the main kind of in-depth discussions of what the two types of sleep are. So NREM stage 1, 2, 3, 4, and REM sleep just by itself. Okay. Okay, this is taken from your book, just a table. I've just highlighted the key things. Look, this is more for if you're in a rush, let's say an hour before the SAC, you want to run through the stuff, but you don't want to go through all of this again. Go through this and it'll give you a basic idea of the comparison. Also for questions where we might ask you to compare and contrast REM sleep with NREM sleep in terms of one key feature, or outline one key difference between a circadian rhythm and an ultradian rhythm, or distinguish between those kinds of key question command terms that we give you. This table gives you that kind of information. Okay, so that's the basic idea. No new content in this, literally everything we've just gone through in our discussion now. So on the notes section of this PowerPoint slide, guys, by the way, there is a small video that you can watch about the stages of sleep if you want extra knowledge there on that topic. Okay, the next spread is 9B, which is the purpose and function of sleep. And honestly, guys, these next two spreads are like super light. Like I said, 9A is the one that's most heavy in terms of content. 9B and 9C are a breeze. Okay, so they're pretty straightforward. So in this spread, guys, in 9B, we're looking about what are the theories that people or scientists have put forward to try to understand why we sleep, okay? Because from the beginning of time, people are like, do we really need to sleep? Can't we be like superhuman? Can't we like just take a 5-minute like nap every day and then just utilize the full 24 hours of our day? Well, no, okay? And there are theories about why we do need to sleep. So these are the two theories. The first one is called the restoration theory of sleep. So the restoration theory of sleep basically indicates that we sleep in order to recover from the activities that we've done during the day that have depleted us. Okay, what the word deplete means is to use something up, whether you're using up your body's resources by going to the gym a lot and tearing your muscle tissues a little bit, or whether you are using your brain a lot by studying a lot for your SACs, by revising content, by doing practice questions, okay? Whatever we do throughout the day, we're either depleting our body's resources, our brain's resources, or both, okay? So basically, the restoration theory suggests that sleep is the solution to restoring, replenishing, and recovering those resources, okay? So basically what the theory indicates is that REM sleep, as I said before, REM sleep is associated with brainwaves that normally are associated with learning and being busy and being awake. REM sleep is associated with your brain, okay? It's associated with your brain's resources. It's associated with cognitive functioning, okay? Like memory consolidation, replacing brain cells. This is why, for example, when I don't know if you guys have heard of the expression, why don't you just sleep on it, okay? Why don't you just sleep on it means if you're going through a issue or a problem and you're racking your brains trying to think of a solution, it's actually better for you to stop thinking, just go to bed, wake up the next day, because then your cognitive function and your mental resources and brain resources would have been restored. You might be able to look at that problem or that issue in a new perspective or in a new light, okay? And so REM sleep is associated with cognitive and mental and brain restoration there, promoting brain growth and brain development. NREM sleep is associated with with the physical body replenishment and physical body restoration. It's to do with repairing your body's muscles, replenishing tissue, promoting growth in terms of physical growth, and promoting physical development there. So if you're someone who's going to the gym a lot, or as I said in the previous example in 9A, if you're running a marathon, okay, or even if you're just someone who exercises a lot in general, you would be having a lot of NREM sleep because your body needs to get into that stage of sleep or that type of sleep to restore your body's muscles. Okay, people who are training for Olympics, for example, are likely to have higher levels or higher time spent in NREM sleep compared to REM sleep if we were to hook them up to if we were to kind of hook them up to a, sleep equipment that shows us that kind of thing, like an EEG or something, we would be able to see that happening. Okay, so this is a comparison of the three of the restorative effects of REM and NREM. You don't need to learn everything. Maybe learn 3 for REM and 3 for NREM. Okay, so any 3 dot points for REM sleep, how it helps your cognitive restoration or mental brain restoration, and any 3 for NREM sleep, so how it helps your body, physical body restoration there. Okay, so that's restoration theory. And there's some issues with the restoration theory. Okay, some of the issues are, okay, before the issues, let's look at the strengths. So some of the strengths or the good things about restoration theory are, number one, it allows us to understand what sleep is about. And this is a strength that's actually common to both restoration theory and the next theory of sleep. So you can learn the same one for both. Restoration theory also gives us a really logical understanding of why we sleep, okay? A simple, straightforward understanding that just makes sense. So that's why we like this theory. The limitations, and I'll just use a red color, the limitations are, it doesn't account for why there are still people who have so many issues and diseases and disabilities in the world, but everyone sleeps for a long time. For example, if the restoration theory suggests the idea that we sleep in order to recover, in order to replenish our resources, in order to become better, why is it that people who are disabled, who are handicapped, who have chronic illnesses, why is it that they can't just sleep for weeks on end and just get better? Okay, so although the restoration theory suggests sleep as a miracle solution, it doesn't really, sleep helps, but it doesn't really help everyone, particularly if you're physically or mentally disabled. It won't help you much. So that's one limitation. Another limitation is that although the theory makes sense and it's logical, there's actually not a lot of evidence scientifically that suggests that yes, NREM is only for physical restoration, and that yes, REM sleep is only for mental or cognitive or brain restoration, okay? There's no conclusive cause and effect relationship there. It doesn't also account for the benefits of sleep on mental health. So it only talks about the brain development and the body development, but what about mental health? What about preventing depression? What about increasing mood? Okay, it doesn't talk about, this theory doesn't talk about mental health impacts of sleep. And again, like I said, there's not many scientific studies that actually support this theory, but a lot of people believe this theory, just because it makes a lot of sense, okay? When you link it back to your everyday life, it makes a lot of sense that people, when they're sick and they go to sleep, they feel better. But again, if you've got a common cold, it's not the same as having diabetes. It's not the same as having a disability, okay? So it's a little bit different there. So that's the restoration theory of sleep. So you need to know 2 strengths, you've only got 2, and 2 limitations, any 2 that are easy for you to remember. Okay, the next theory of sleep that we look at is called the evolutionary theory. So the evolutionary theory indicates that we sleep in order to survive. That's the basic idea. Okay, so sleep equals to survival. Okay, that's the basic idea. The evolutionary theory is called the evolutionary theory because basically what its believers or what people who support this theory think is that as a process of evolution and of human development over time and all that stuff, whenever it got dark outside, whenever the environment was dangerous, the best thing to do after you'd finished eating, drinking, going to the toilet, caring for your young children, or whatever, the best thing to do was to sleep. What else can you do? Can you go outside and get eaten by a tiger in the nighttime because you can't see? I don't think so. So evolutionary theory suggests that sleep equals to survival, because the best thing to do once it's dark outside is to go to sleep. Okay, we're safe, we're protected, we can survive. That's the explanation for humans. If we link it to animals, we can say that organisms that sleep are less likely to be active or pouncing around here and there, and thus are less likely to be seen by their predators, as seen by Mr. Rabbit sleeping in his little burrow here. Okay, now at the same time, that kind of makes sense. That doesn't also make sense, and we'll talk about this as one of our limitations. Okay, so one of the issues with, one of the things that gives evolutionary theory some value is that it kind of does make sense, okay? It kind of talks about the fact that we work on a circadian cycle when it comes to our sleep-wake cycle. So we wake up when it's light and we sleep when it's dark, okay? And for most people, unless you're like a shift worker or something like that that does night shift, for most people, this is the typical sleep-wake cycle, okay? Another strength is that it, just like the previous theory, it does give us an understanding of the purpose and function of sleep. And it's one that does seem logical. It doesn't seem like nonsense, in other words. Okay. Now, coming to some of the limitations. While Mr. Rabbit sleeps in his little burrow, thinking that he's not being, watched by a predator, maybe a predator has seen him going into his burrow and is waiting up here. Okay. Ready to wait until Mr. Rabbit has fallen asleep to go in and basically gobble him up. Okay, Mr. Rabbit is nice and asleep and he's not really aware of his environment around him. So he doesn't even realize he's being eaten until he's in the tummy of whatever this thing that I've just drawn is. Okay, so the general idea here is that we can't say that organisms that sleep are less likely to be seen by their predators, because although that can be true to a certain extent, when you're asleep, you have a lack of awareness. So that actually puts that organism more at risk, okay? Because if a monster was to kind of attack them, maybe let's make it into a lion. Okay, guys, that's a lion, some whiskers. Okay, if that was to attack the rabbit would not actually understand or have an understanding of what's happening around him if he is asleep, okay? Because sleep is an altered state of consciousness. We're not as aware. Our reflexes are not as on point as if we were awake and in a normal waking state of consciousness there. Okay, so that's the issue with the evolutionary theory of sleep, and that's the reason why it doesn't make sense, okay? There's also, again, similar to the previous theory, it doesn't explain why sleep benefits our mental health, okay? So that's one of the issues or limitations of this theory as well. And finally, there's not many scientific studies to actually support this theory either. So that's missing there as well. Okay, just like the previous slide, learn any two strengths and any two limitations. Okay, any two that make the most sense to you, that are easiest for you to remember. Okay, just before we start the next spread, just to quickly summarize the two theories of sleep. The restoration theory of sleep says that we sleep in order to restore, recover, and replenish our resources, either the resources of our brain, like our brain cells, which is what REM sleep is responsible for, as well as our body. So things like our muscle cells, our nerves, all that stuff is associated with NREM sleep. So one type of sleep is associated with physical restoration of the physical body, muscles and tissues. The other is associated with the brain, brain restoration, brain development, all that stuff that helps us to learn, memorize and stuff. As you guys are probably not as active as usual, but you're still mentally active nowadays studying for SACs and stuff like that, we could probably say that if we hooked you guys up to an EEG, or even if I hooked myself up to an EEG, I'd probably see a little bit more REM sleep than NREM sleep, okay? Because we're all doing stuff now that uses our mental resources, whether we're planning for lessons, making PowerPoints, going through content, whether we're doing a quiz to practice for the SAC, all of that requires your brain. So your brains are under a lot of activity these days, more so than usual, okay? Okay, so, and obviously the evolutionary theory is we sleep in order to survive. When it's dark, there's nothing left for us to do, so we might as well sleep. We're less likely to leave the house in the dark environment and get hit by a passing car. Okay, that's less likely to happen, so we're more likely to survive as a result of that. Okay, last spread, and then we're done with chapter 9, is sleep across the lifespan. So what we're looking at, guys, here is we're looking at this idea of as you go across the lifespan, or as you go through different ages of your lifespan, whether you're a little baby, whether you're a child, whether you're a teenager, whether you're an adult, okay, as you go through the different stages of the lifespan, you are going to experience changes in your sleep. We're looking at the changes in terms of how many hours we sleep as we get older, as well as how much percentage of NREM as well as REM sleep that we go through as we get older. And again, we're going to link back to our hypnogram, which we looked at earlier in the lesson, and understand what it's telling us with reference to a specific age of the lifespan there. Okay, so this spread is only like 2 slides long or 3 slides long, I think. So it's not too long there. What you guys need to know now is you need to memorize this diagram here, okay? This diagram, and I've updated a lot of the ages from last year because your book has different information. Again, I don't like this topic a whole lot for the simple reason that different books and different resources give you different information, okay? For example, some books will say that infants only sleep 10 hours. Some books will say that adolescents have to sleep 9 to 10 hours, but our book says that they have to sleep 8.5 hours. Obviously, because we're sticking with Edroller, we will stick with that number there. Now, Vika are obviously aware of this issue, that different books have different numbers, and they've generally said in the past that they avoid questions asking for specific numbers like this. Okay, they might ask you to describe the sleep patterns, but they might not ask you for the specific numbers necessarily. If they do, they'll ask it more in a range, like something like this rather than 8.5, if that makes sense. Okay. So what you guys need to know is you need to know for each stage of the lifespan, how many hours those people are expected to sleep or should be sleeping. And you need to know the proportions of REM and NREM. You don't need to memorize the years, but you obviously need to know the difference between a newborn and an infant, for example, or a child and an adolescent. Okay, just to know where childhood stops and where adolescence begin. So most of you at this stage of your life will be in the adolescent stage. Okay, so most of you require 8.5 hours of sleep. In that 8.5 hours of sleep, 20% of your sleep is typically REM, maybe more or less though. 80% can typically be suggested to be NREM. Okay. For newborns, you can see that there is an equal number there. And it's important to understand why that number is equal. Okay. When you're a newborn baby, you don't just need physical development. No newborn baby just comes out into the world and is like, I want to get abs. Like, you know, it's not like, it doesn't need extra NREM sleep for extra physical development or physical growth there. It needs an equal amount of physical and mental or brain restoration. For that reason, it's got 50% REM and 50% NREM because it needs to develop equally in terms of physical body and physical growth, as well as brain growth and brain development too. Okay, because it's just a newborn. It's still got a lot of development there to go. When that newborn turns 3 months up to the age of 2 years, we consider that to be an infant. And infants need slightly less sleep time, 13.5 hours. And they also spend a little bit more time in NREM sleep now and a little bit less time in REM. This is because by the age of 3 months, the baby's brain is kind of has developed to the point where it can now dedicate more time to NREM, physical body growth and physical restoration. Okay, this is the time period at which most children are trying their best to walk, to crawl, okay, to talk. All of these things are associated with the physical body, hence more percentage of time spent in NREM sleep compared to REM. In childhood, we spend about 10 to 12 hours asleep. Okay, out of those 10 to 12 hours, it can range from 75 to 80% NREM to 20 to 25% REM. Now, that range is basically depending on how old you are. So if you're only 2 years old, you'd most likely be spending 25% at REM and about 75% NREM there. Okay, but as you move towards your adolescent years of 14, 13 years old, your sleep is going to more resemble this. So you're going to have 20% REM and 80% NREM. Okay, depending, again, it's like almost 2 to 14 years is a long gap, a long time frame. So depending on which stage of childhood you're in, you will have the range that corresponds to that. When you're an adolescent, which is 14 to 18 years old, which is most of your high school years there, or all of your high school years almost, you've got, similar to adults, you've got an 80% NREM and a 20% REM. When you're an adult, so probably next year or the year after, up to the age of 75 years, typically you need about 6 to 8 hours. Okay, as you get older, that number will go towards about 6 hours. Okay, but generally most of us should be getting 6, 7, 8 hours when you're an adult. Okay, again, in your book, they divide this into early adulthood, middle adulthood, and like, yeah, they're divided into a few sub-stages. I feel like that's too pedantic and that's too technical. Like, we're never going to ask you about that. So I've just grouped it into adulthood as one big stage and just given you the range there. Okay, so just to make things a bit easier for us. And the last one is old age. So old age is defined as 75 plus. Okay, and you can see that a person in old age doesn't have really good sleep quality as well, but generally doesn't sleep for as long as you do when you're an adolescent or when you do when you're a child. Now, 80% NREM, this is what your book says. Your book says that old adults spend 80% time in NREM and 20% in REM. I had to put an asterisk there because I don't think this is true based off other textbook resources that we've used in the past, or based on some online resources as well. This can be as low as 15% for some old people, okay? So for some people above the age of 75, they might be spending more time in NREM, so maybe 85% time in NREM and 15% in REM. So what does this mean for you? It means that if you write your answer, you don't have to specifically write 20% REM exactly. You can say approximately 20%, or you can even give a range like 15 to 20%, okay? The main reason, guys, that I want to stress this is I don't want you guys to think that old people have the same time in REM sleep and NREM sleep as the other stages of the lifespan, okay? We know, and the research shows that old people have very bad sleep patterns compared to other stages of the lifespan, okay? So this is something that I've just put as a disclaimer there. You can talk about the range as being 15 to 20% REM, and you can talk about it as being 80 to 85% NREM, okay? That's why I wrote could be lower there. Okay, so that's what you need to know. Just a few numbers there. We generally don't ask you to memorize numbers, but these ones we do need to know. So just know them for the SAC and have an understanding of them for the exam too. Okay, this is kind of common sense, just giving you a more text-based description of the previous diagram, and we will be done in 5 minutes, so don't stress. Generally what we see, guys, and we're going to learn more about this in chapter 10, as a result of puberty, adolescents actually have issues with their sleep, okay? You might have realized this maybe when you went through puberty, or maybe in the years following, okay? Because of the release of different hormones during puberty, like your growth hormone, as well as the changes that happen to your sleep hormone, you actually don't feel sleepy as early as you did in childhood. So what that means is if your parents put you to bed at 9 p.m. in childhood, okay, and then you become a teenager, you no longer feel sleepy at 9 p.m. This is because melatonin is released later into the night. You might only feel sleepy at 12 a.m. or 1 a.m. Okay? And that's because your melatonin, or your sleep hormone that's supposed to normally make you feel sleepy, isn't released at the same time that it was released in childhood, which in childhood might have been 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. Okay, which then makes you sleepy and want to get into bed by 9 p.m. and fall asleep earlier. Okay, that's the first point. We're going to learn more about this in chapter 10, because for some adolescents or some teenagers, this hormonal issue that affects their sleep hormone can actually affect their sleep to the extent that they have to see a psychologist, or they have to get on like an actual sleeping plan, okay, where they actually have to like plan out a routine for sleep, avoid caffeine, avoid screen time before bed, and all this stuff. So we'll learn more about this in chapter 10 when we look at sleep disorders. Also, generally, the older you are, the less REM sleep you will experience. If you ever look at a hypnogram of an old person, you will see less blocks of REM sleep there. The blocks are a lot smaller and are not shaded in as much, okay, which shows you that they're experiencing less REM sleep. In general, people as they get older are more weaker, okay, they have medical issues, or they develop medical issues that make them get up throughout the night. They might have bladder issues that cause them to keep getting up to go toilet, which also disrupts their sleep. And in general, we say that people who are elderly have fragmented sleep. Fragmented means it's not a smooth line, it's like continuous, broken up. Okay, so that also affects the amount of REM sleep you can have, because you can only have REM sleep if you have continuous sleep, where you're sleeping at a stretch and you're not waking up in between every 1 or 2 hours there. But unfortunately, that's what a lot of old people experience. So that's what we call as the 2 key takeaway points from the previous diagram we looked at. Okay, the last slide that we're looking at for today, guys, is the hypnogram. So again, this is showing you an elderly person's sleep episode. If you compare this to the hypnogram we looked at earlier, which was the adults, you can see that although this person goes through REM sleep cycles, they don't go through as many as the adult. I think the adult went through about 5 or 6. This person only goes through 4. So we're looking at probably someone's hypnogram who's probably over the age of 75 here. Okay, you can also see that this person doesn't really reach NREM stage 4 at any point of their sleep, which shows that they experience less deep sleep. This is sad, because what this means is that if you live to the age of 75 or above, typically you will experience less deep sleep. You wake up and you feel like you didn't really have a good sleep. Okay. And generally, when older people are asked to rate their sleep for health surveys and health diagnostic criteria for diseases and health issues or health conditions, they always rate their sleep as being poor or poor or not satisfying, or they use like negative adjectives to describe this. Okay, so that's kind of showing that their self-assessed health status with reference to sleep is actually quite low. Okay, they don't actually experience a good level of sleep then. So that's just the diagram for you there, guys. And you can see that this sleep hypnogram ends at 7 hours, which means that it kind of shows it's not for an infant. An infant's one would have to be, about 13.5 hours. It's not for a newborn because a newborn's would have to be 16 hours. So looking at the duration, we can kind of make a judgment as to which kind of person or which age person this hypnogram belongs to. Okay. Again, I know in the previous slide we said that elderly people's sleep cycle is 5 to 6 hours, and this hypnogram shows us 7. So you might be thinking that doesn't add up. And this is, again, the reason why I do not like this topic, because different things give us different information. Also, guys, you have to remember that sleep is not the same for everyone. Some people age 75 and above might sleep for 7 hours. Some people might only sleep for 5 hours. It's dependent on many factors, including things like medical issues, including things like pre-existing conditions, disabilities, medications that people might be on can affect their sleep, caffeine intake. All these factors can come into play, okay? But just by looking at this, by understanding that this person hasn't reached the stages of deep sleep or has only just reached NREM stage 3, but has barely reached any stage 4, shows us that this is a poor quality sleep, shows us that this belongs to an elderly person. Okay, really, really important to know how to read the hypnograms. In fact, usually we don't put hypnograms in the SACs, but I think as an exam practice, we will put one in as a multiple choice question, maybe for this upcoming SAC. Okay, so make sure you understand how to read this. It has been tested on the exam numerous times, both in this study design and previous study designs. So you need to know how to read it, especially because if you've not got the experience of seeing and analyzing this before, if this comes up to you in the exam, you look at this and you get a heart attack. Okay, that's what's going to happen. So you have to know how to read this well before, so you're prepared and you're confident when you see one and you know how to analyze one. Okay. All right, so guys, that's it for today. So I'm just going to stop the recording here.